just a quick recap. Back to the structure. I just wanted you to kind of remember this again. We're about to get into a little bit more complicated stuff, but it won't be as bad. It should be fine. All right. So how do we use Mongo? First, we need to use mlab. That was our first way of actually getting access to a MongoDB instance. And now we actually want to use Mongo in our code base, in our server, JavaScript, Node.js, whatever. So to use that, we use Mongoose. Mongoose, which is a Node.js library. If you remember, Node.js library gets installed with npm. You don't need to do this right now. We'll get into this later. So you should be fine. This is just how you install it. You do npm install. The --save is what actually triggers the package. It triggers the change in your package.json so that it actually updates your package.json, if that makes sense. Okay? So, yes. So now we just have a warm-up before we actually go do the workshop. These are just a couple of code snippets. They are not actually workable. You don't need to, if you want to, you could save it on your own computer, but they don't actually work. It's just a snippet to sort of give you a guide. All right? If you enter this link here, you will see the snippet. And this uses something that's called Gist. Gist is just, it's a service like GitHub, except you only share a piece of code or a piece of text, some form of file. You could share a zip file, whatever you want. Okay, if that makes sense. So, all right, so let's move on. So for our for our warm-up, we're going to work with just sort of, imagine that we had this file structure. This is not JSON, by the way. This is I was trying to demonstrate what our file structure looks like. It looks very similar to what you already have. You have a root folder, which is like where everything is. In the root folder, you have package.json, git ignore, and there are a couple of new files that we added here. We have models which I will get into later. I'm just showing you what the new files are. Models contain student.js. In routes, I removed the views.js, because this is just an example, we don't really need to worry about that. But we have API.js, and the last file here is db.js. All right? So everyone can follow? This is just an example. All right, so in our example, we want to connect we want to connect our server with our MongoDB instance. So if you remember from earlier, we had the MongoDB URI. That is what this URI here does. Constant MongoDB URL. I say URL, URI, URL, kind of the same thing. So this is where you would paste your URL, put the username and the password, QWERTY123, and you just copy and paste. The rest is just from copying and pasting. And we want to connect to our MongoDB instance. First, to get Mongoose, we use this require keyword here. That's like our imports. We are importing Mongoose from Mongoose. If we have installed npm install Mongoose, they should work. And there's this thing here that says option, use Mongo client. Kind of just trust me, it will make your life easier. You don't really need to understand what it does. It's just there to make your life easier. And we have Mongoose. So now that we created all of our variables, to actually connect to MongoDB instance, we call this method here mongoose.connect. And it takes in two parameters. The first one is the URL that we have earlier top here. And the second one is the option right here. So URL, comma, option. That's the second parameter. There's a link in this code snippet somewhere. I put a bunch of comments for questions you may have. I added a link to the option. There's multiple options you can use. They're like a little more advanced. We don't really need to worry about them. If you're curious, you can look them up. And then the next thing is mongoose.promise equal global.promise. That is something else that we will get into later this week. We don't actually need that line, but it will also make our life easier. But next week we'll explain what a promise is and it will make more sense. But for now, you would have that code in there. And then finally, by this time we're already connected to our database, but now we sort of want to get a sense of where we are, what is happening. So that's why we get the connection here. This is just our database connection. And this line here is telling us when we get an error, I want you to tell me that we have an error, right? So that is what this method here, console.error.bind, console, blah, blah, blah. It sounds complicated, but all it's doing is just telling you, if I have an error, tell me that I have an error, okay? And the next thing, DB connection that on connected. So when we are connected to our database, I want you to tell me, I want you to log in my console, database connected. That's what those two lines are doing. Okay? So before we get into more stuff, we have to explain what is a schema. Remember I talked about schema earlier? I have to explain what a schema is and what a mongoose model is. So a mongoose schema is a way of structuring your data. And what that means is like, I'll show an example after this, but the higher level picture of what it is you want to I want my data to kind of look like this, okay? And it can allow you to have a stricter structure to your data. And the other thing is that each collection in your database needs to have a schema. The schema is what is, remember when I said each collection should have similar stuff? This schema is what is telling the collection, I want my data to kind of look like this. And here is our example from earlier. We have our schema right here. We have a schema, we have our collection right here, and we have our documents. Each document has a field name and age. So what is the schema for this? The schema for this is just, you want the schema looks like, I want the name to be a string, and I want the age to be a number. That's what the schema for this is doing. Does everyone follow? All right. So here's another, going back to that visual thing. The schema kind of works as a filter when you're adding data into your database. It will filter out everything that doesn't look like what the data is supposed to look like. Right? So for example, the schema is filtering out everything and making sure that only the data that can fit in that filter box actually gets into the box. So all these circle and oval shape things are not going to get into our box. That's what the schema is doing. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Finally, there's multiple schema types. If I go back here, remember we want the name to be a string and the age to be a number. Well, you could have multiple schema types. You could have something to be an array. You could have a boolean, different things. If you're more curious about what these are, just go on this link. And you will have the PowerPoint should be online, so you should have access to this if you want to follow along. And these are just the different types. Mix is just a combination of everything else. All right. Finally, we have models. So when I get into like a weird analogy, but think of the schema as like the skeleton of some living body, and the model is like the actual like flesh, like the actual body. So if you just have a skeleton, the skeleton can't really do anything, even though it provides the structure. The model is what allows you to have all this functionalities. And yeah, so now we're gonna look at an example of how to create a schema and then how to create a model. So here we again require Mongoose. So far we've seen two ways of using Mongoose. One of the ways is connecting to a database, and the other way is creating your models. So you require Mongoose at the beginning here, and then you create the schema first. Because you cannot have a body without a skeleton. So you need to have the skeleton first. And then when you create a schema, you tell it, I want the name to be a string and the quotes to be a number. That's what the schema is doing there. You have the keyword new mongoose.schema. And the next thing is to actually create the model. And here's what you create the model. You declare, you name your model. The variable name is could be whatever you want, but there's two parameters when you do constant students equal mongoose.model. The first parameter is the name of your model. You're giving it a name. This is a model for students. Yeah. And the second parameter is the schema. So once you do this, you have created the model. And now that you have the model, you have to export this model. Have we explained does everyone understand what module.export does? All right, so I'll quickly explain that. I'll skip a couple of slides. We'll get into this. Let's see. So in here, you see how at the beginning I say constant students equals require. I put some file path there, and I get student.js. I'm getting the entire file student.js, which is this file here. Okay? When you export something, in different languages like Python, for example, when you're importing something, you're importing the entire file. In JavaScript, you have to tell, this is also in the backend, by the way. In JavaScript, when you're importing something, the file that you're importing, you have to tell that file, I want you to only take this, and when you do module.export, that is what it's doing. You're telling it, if someone wanted to import this file, only take students. Does that make sense? All right, so, yes. Now this is just when you want to create a model in general, because the model is what you use when you want to save stuff in your database. To create a model, in general, you have to create the schema first, and then once you create the schema, you create the model. And the schema is made of this JSON object, which has field and types. You could put whatever field you want and put the type of that field. And then for the model, remember your first thing is the model name, and then you have the model schema right here, model name schema. And the model name has to be a string. The schema has to be of type Mongo schema. To create a Mongo schema, that's right here where you get that type, Mongo schema. But so, what about you want to have some restriction on your model, right? Oh wait, first I'll explain this first. So this is now, a model is sort of like a fancier collection in your MongoDB instance. And a model kind of allows you to do different things in that one specific collection. It allows you to save things in the collection, edit things, or add things into that collection. And now you might be wondering, well, what is the name of the collection, right? The way Mongoose takes the collection name, it will take the name that you give it, students, and put it in lowercase. And sometimes you might add an S. So for example here, your collection will be students. Lowercase s, students. That would be what your collection is. So, okay. So now, say you want to put more restriction to your data, right? Here is how you would do that. We're back. Everything is the same except for our schemas. Now, instead of having name equals string, we're doing name equals this big object. And there are multiple keys that you could use. And you always have to specify the type. The type here, you want that to be a string. But now you add this keyword here, which is required. So what does that mean? Sometimes when you're saving things with your with the model, you don't have to specify some of the parameters that you put. So you could say, I'm saving this new data type. I'm saving this new document, and this document has a name, Robert, but you don't specify the age. That will actually go through. But now you're saying, I want the age to be required. What that means is, when you're saving a document, if you don't specify the age, then it will throw an error and say, you didn't specify the age, you need to specify the age. That's what it's doing. And there is this other keyword here that says unique. What the unique does is that you want the name to be unique. So now, if you saved Robert in a database, someone with the name Robert and some age, and then some other time you want to save another Robert, it will throw an error and say, you already have a Robert and you wanted me to have everything to be unique. So I'm not going to save Robert because he has to be unique, so you better change this name. That's what unique keyword does. And again, in the code snippet, I put a link to the different types of things you could add. Actually, we have a slide just for that. These are the parameters that you could have, like type, required, unique. You have different parameters. Like for numbers, you have the min and the max. If your number was greater than 30, it will cause an error in this case. If your number was lower than 1, it will cause an error. All right. And yeah, some more link. Is anybody confused so far? Does anybody have a question? Okay. So now that we have our model, we're going to import that model. So now, back to here first, we look at the file path. The file path is source models student.js, and we move this file path here. We are in API.js. Okay? If you're requiring the student's model, you have to move from wherever you are, which is inside of routes. You have to exit that file, going into the models directory, and select the student.js. That's what this line here is doing. And the double dot says exit out of this folder, and then go into the models folder and choose student.js. Finally, or I guess before finally, you create your student that you want to save, and it becomes super simple. You just say new students with the new student you just required, and you'd say, I want my student to be named Robert, and I want the course to be 6. Fine. Then the last thing we do is student Robert.save. This saves this student that you just created. It saves him in the collection called students. That's what this right here is doing. So let's assume now that you have saved a bunch of documents in your collection, and you want to get one of those documents. In this case, I want to find the student whose name is Robert. And this model here that we created earlier, remember I said it will give you some functionalities? Here's one of those functionalities. If you do student.find one, you're telling them, I want you to find one of the students, and the next thing are the parameters. You say, I want you to find one student whose name is Robert. And then you have a callback function. In this callback contains 2 parameters, error and student Robert. So let's see. So before, we're going to get into our code, the code that we have for the slide. And there's something that we didn't do there. We didn't actually check the error, like where it says if error, and then it says else if this, and then else. We don't actually do that. But I'm mentioning it here because this is just safe coding practices. The way it works is, in your callback, if you get an error, this guy here, student Robert, will be null, and your error will be some object. So this first check here, if error, is checking, if I have an error, I want you to do this. What is inside of this bracket? Does that make sense? So, and I could handle the error. Here I just put console log error. So in your server you will see the console say, oh, I got an error. And the next thing you want to do is check if the student is null. Remember the triple equal? So you check if your student is null. What does that mean? That means that you might not have an error, but then your database might not have anybody named Robert. So that's why you want to check if you actually found that user whose name is Robert in your database. The next thing, if this is null, then this happens, whatever is inside of that block. That's why I say handle the case where no student is found in the database. But if that doesn't happen, then that means you actually found the student. So now we safely know that we actually found the student. So then you handle that case where you found the student, and you just say the student course is student Robert course. Okay? And you will see this pattern multiple times. You always have to check if you have an error, check if you found something, and if you did find something, do something with whatever you found. Okay. So this was finding one document in a database. But there's another way that you could find a document. I say this is like traditional way, but it's more like the standard practice. So remember when I said that whenever you save a document, your document has a unique ID. So if your document has a unique ID, that means that if you're finding a document based on that ID, it will either find one specific person or not find anybody. If we go back to this example, this method here, in the case that you had multiple student named Robert, it will just find the first student and give you that student. But in this case, the ID is unique, so it will find the ID that you were looking for, right here. So you do student.find by ID. First parameter is the ID, and the second parameter is the callback. The second thing is the callback here, which is very similar to before. You have an error and you have the actual student. You check if you have an error. If you don't have an error, you check. If you don't have an error, but you check if you actually found the student. If you actually found the student, then you do this. You say, oh, the student name is this, and the student course number is this. That's what find by ID is doing. Next thing is finding many documents in the database. So this method here, it says specifically find one. But I wanted to find every student whose name is Robert. To do that, you just do student.find. So this will find every single student whose name is Robert and return an array with a bunch of objects containing all the students whose names are Robert and their course number and any other parameter that you added in your schema. So you still have to check if there's an error. You still have to check, did you actually find anybody? But the check is different for this one. Since this is an array, you check if the length of the array is 0, which is equivalent to saying, I return a list of students, but that list contains nobody. It's equivalent to saying I didn't find anybody. That's why you check if the length is 0. If you check if it's null, this will never be null because an array is not null type. And the last case is find if, actually check if you actually found the student. And right here says student at length, you're just saying the number of students named Robert is student name at length. Is anybody has a question? All right. So I want to quickly point out right here, I only put name Robert. However, for this case and also the find one case, you can actually specify multiple parameters. I could say find the student whose name, find all of the students whose name is Robert and all of the students who are course 6. And you just have to do that inside of this parameter. So you could specify multiple parameters in your parameter section here. That's what this is doing. Yeah?
Does that only find students that are named Robert and are course 6?
Yeah.
Or?
No, all the students who are named Robert and course 6. Yeah. Yes?
For find by ID, would you have had to specify an ID
Yes.
already in the model?
You don't, when you create a new document, as I mentioned earlier, it automatically creates a unique ID. So this is referring to that unique ID. So you don't have to have that in your, like right here, you don't have to add an ID parameter. Anybody else? All right. The next thing is you want to edit things that are in your database, and you want to edit a specific document. To do that is really, really simple. You just do, oh, there's 2 of them here. But that doesn't matter. Don't do this, it will cause an error. But just you just have students, and so first you require the student again, import it into your file, and if you want to modify a student, you have to find the student first. So you find him like we did earlier, find one, and then if you actually have the student, that's when you can modify it. So once you have the student, then you modify whatever you wanted to modify, And here I want to say, I want to change my course to 21. And click, and then at the end you do Robert.save. Does that make sense? This .save method is the one we used earlier in creating the document. So what you're doing here is just saying, change the course number and save the changes. All right? And the next thing is removing documents. There is a method called remove. So you have to be careful with this method. When you do .remove, it works the same way as .find. It will remove every single student whose name is Robert. So you always check if there's an error. And then if there's no error, here you don't have to, the result will always be something in case you don't have an error. And this result will tell you, it will tell you how many students did I find and how many students did I remove. And it kind of looks like this. It looks like, and I think there's a number of students that you actually found, number modified, and okay is a number, okay is like also the number of students you find. You have to look at the documentation and it will explain these things, but essentially this is what it looks like. So, does anybody, before we start our workshop, does anybody have a question? All right. Okay, so we're going to do our workshop. And first thing we do is just quickly review our repository, and then we're going to hook up the backend with the front end. So we'll connect our server with our database, and then we hook up the backend with the front end. That's what our workshop will be about. So go on GitHub, go on this link, and clone the repository to your computer. If you're done, just raise your hand so I have an idea. Okay. Also, if you need help, just call one of the. Alright, so this workshop will consist of multiple steps, and in the first step, we actually want to connect our app to MongoDB. So once you have your domain, run git checkout step 0. And then you run npm install to install all the necessary packages. And the next thing is installing Mongoose, because we want to actually use it. So git checkout step 0, and then npm install. And the last thing is npm install --save Mongoose. With this, we'll update our package.json. So now our code base should look something like this. You have, let's see. You have package.json as usual, get ignore. There are new files that you didn't have from yesterday that are added here. And all these new files are empty, by the way. That's what our workshop will be about. We're going to be filling up this file. You have models, which are the models we were talking about earlier to create, for our Catbook example, models contain comments and stories, and you have db.js. And also app.js. These are the files that we're going to touch on. So, is everyone on the same page? All right. So now, open DB.js. It should look something like this. So now I want you to find your MongoDB URL and paste it in here.
Wait, can you go back to the terminal?
Terminal.
What do you do before you do npm install?
Check out step 0.
Git checkout step 0.
What if it says bash npm command?
Here, I'll help. Here, you can. Here.
So where do you find the link again? You go on MLab, in your Catbook example, copy and paste this link right here. What happened there? Yeah. You copy and paste the link, and then remember you have to change your user and the password. So this is where you're putting whatever user you created, you want to enter that information here. My user was Robert G, and the password was.
DB.js is empty.
Did you check out step 0?
What's step 0?
No, it's not.
Did you open that step 0? Oh, and it's on. Alright, I'll check.
You guys have this, right? Alright, so you enter your username and password right here, and then you click save. And we should get, when we're connected, we should get a message saying database connected. So
Yeah, so guys, if you pulled Workshop 3 a few days ago, you will not have anything in db.js. To fill it out, you just need to type git pull, and it will fill it out for you. Just changes were made when we started.
yeah. Is everybody good? Thumbs up? Yes, question?
It's still getting like npm command.
Clone it again. If
I will.
Alright, so now that we have entered our database URL right here, if we